Hey, everybody. Welcome to another great episode of the Burn Your Boats podcast. Do you ever feel like you're on a hamster wheel, always chasing the American dream, but never quite catching it? You're always a day late and a dollar short. And if that phrase rings true to you, I can tell you right now that it certainly rings true to me. And I'm always asking myself, when is enough enough? Okay. So this week, we're going to tackle that question. And we actually take a trip across the Atlantic to explore a different way of life. So David right now is sitting in France. He spent about a month between Spain and France, and he's going to spend another month over in Europe. And I'll be joining him here in a few weeks. And the interesting thing is that basically it kind of inspired us to be able to compare the hustle of the United States versus the more chill, maybe the little bit different mindset of maybe how a typical European may, kind of live their life. And that kind of asks the big question, what do we truly want in life? But even more importantly, what is the price that we are willing to pay for what we actually want in life? So today we're going to dive into the importance of travel for broadening your perspective and how you define your goals and priorities, which is the key to finding fulfillment. Is financial freedom the ultimate prize? Is it about buying your time back and slowing down, guys, slowing down to focus on your relationships, your mental health, and your well-being? So join us today as we unpack the costs associated with your dreams and explore the value of patience, calculated risks, and lifelong learning. This episode is your passport, sorry everybody, I had to do that, to a deeper understanding of yourself and what truly matters. So buckle up and let's get ready to explore. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Burn Your Boats Wealth. Today is interesting. We had spoken a little bit, David and I, previous to this episode. David is actually sitting in Collier. Is it Collier, France? Did I pronounce that right, David?
Collier. Yeah, you did well. I'll give you that.
What would the French, would they appreciate that, or would they be like, that American idiot, he didn't say it the right way?
I'd say they're pretty used to having their language butchered, but yeah, that's I think they'll let you away with it.
So I think David and I share a very much a passion for traveling. I think that whenever you have conversations with people that have traveled outside of our walls of the United States, you'll see that they typically have different visions, they have different experiences, and it helps to kind of shape their opinions about certain things. And so I always am excited when I hear that someone's traveled to this place or that place. I'm like, just tell me all about it. What did you think? What type of conversations did you have? And that, David, got us to talking today about ultimately sitting in France, and you were in Spain a couple of weeks ago, is, what are some of the differences that you've seen in terms of the lifestyle, right? The culture, the way that they carry themselves. Are they stressed out? Are they not stressed out? Are they, is their iPad stuck to their face when they're walking around? And, we came up with some kind of interesting findings that you had. And, it kind of led us to the topic of this discussion today, which is, what do you want, right? Like, I think as Americans, well, a lot of times it's like, well, what do you want? I want wealth. I want freedom. I want to have money. And I think that we all just kind of assume that that's how it is wherever you are, right? Who wouldn't want to be rich, right? So, David, you spent 9 hours in a plane with a sick child and all the brain damage of getting over to Spain on a 10-hour flight. But now you've had a chance to let the dust settle. You've been able to sit in coffee shops and go take cold plunges into 55-degree, water in France. Talk to us a little bit about kind of some of your experiences to how the lifestyle is over there, and we can kind of compare and contrast what it's like maybe versus what we're seeing here on a day-to-day basis.
Well, Clark, the idea that we've come up with for this podcast today is, what do you want? Because I think that is the hardest question for most people to answer. What do you want? Okay. And because after you can answer what is it you want, people say, I want to be healthy, I want to be wealthy, I want to have, I just want my kids to be happy. People will give these things that are answers that they're big answers. Like, I want to be healthy. Okay, well, to eat well and exercise, it's not something that's unattainable. It's just something you need to go do every day. And there's things that are out of your control. I want my kids to be happy. Well, you could give them all at a head start in the world, but you can't make anybody happy. But what we can do is we can observe other places, other cultures, where we're trying to answer the question like, what do you want? I'm being challenged here about what it is that, let's say, when I'm in America, like what I want. Because what I want in America obviously has changed over the years, Clark, right?
Right.
Real estate has helped give me what I want because for me, I've always wanted my time back. That's what I want. That was the thing. And I went to war and I worked the last, 30 years, 25 years to get my time back. And that's the answer. That's what I want. I don't need to be a billionaire. I don't need those things because I know that my happiest, I didn't have any money at all. And some of my most challenging times, I did have money. And conversely, some of the times when I had no money, I was,
It sucked.
deeply unhappy.
Yeah,
And at
right.
certain times when I've had money, and I've been very happy. So I realize that money is not what makes us happy. And so you asked me, what is it I see? I'm here now, a little over 2 weeks. I'm going to be here for the remainder of the summer. And in general, and everything I'm about to say here is a generalization, but people here appear to be much less stressed. They walk slower. They sit around in coffee shops. And I brought this up with you the other day. Nobody is on their phone. I could walk down the street and there could be a couple of hundred people on the street. Nobody is walking on their phone. Very few people are even listening to headphones.
Yeah.
And you'll see the odd person who's maybe on the phone, on a physical phone, having a conversation, but it's rare. Walk into a coffee shop here, nobody has a laptop out. Nobody. It's not what they're doing. Okay. And I think that's very challenging right off the top because I come in with my laptop. I'm like, oh God, I
Oh
feel like
God, look at this
sick.
American. Oh geez.
Yeah,
Here he
right.
goes.
You know, but it you can tell here that they're not chasing money, right? That you go into a store, go into any kind of situation, there's nobody chasing you when you walk in the door. Let's say they'll say bonjour, bonjour, but nobody else is there. From there on out, there's nobody chasing you to sell you something or to
Yeah.
make sure that you get amazing service or to make sure that you buy something. It's not honed. That like sell, sell, sell. It's not here. They trust that you've walked into the shop and they trust that you know what it is that you want. And they trust that you'll say it to them when you're ready. Right. And so that the observations I have here, Clark, is when I go into coffee shops, people are sitting down talking to each other. Large groups of teenagers are hanging out, not a single phone out. I go into bars and restaurants. Again, people are chatting, people are laughing and smiling with each other. I'm not saying this is the land of laughing and smiling. These are generalizations. But they're not chasing something that I can sense in the States. In the States, we're always working, we're always chasing towards something. And so we can talk about that. And that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what is it that you want. So for me, what I want and what I've always wanted was my time back so that I could go just today. I woke up, I went for a hike with my 8-year-old. We had long conversations about what it is to be 8. And yesterday I went on hikes with my 6-year-old up to this castle on the other side of town. I didn't think he could do it. but I can tell you all of the characters in Minecraft now. I didn't know them yesterday, but I can tell you who they are today. And, I could see the joy that my kids have had just having these long, meandering walks in the mountains with their dad. Because I'm away from my laptop. I'm away from my phone. And it's helped me answer that question, what do I want? What I want is my time back. And what I want is to have a deeper relationship with my kids, my wife, with you, with this podcast. I want to be able to give my time to things and not be always just financially stressed and financially just under pressure, trying to be bigger, better. There's always somebody above you that you're chasing. And I think social media, I think American culture in general is like, you can go be that. You can be that. And if that's what you want, and that's the second part of this conversation, is going to be go chase that dream. But here's why I think things are a little bit different here. Number one, taxes are super high. So I think it disincentivizes a certain amount of, ambition at all costs. I'm not saying, again, if you're French, and just don't get angry with me, or if you're American, don't scoff at the French, because I'm just walking by their little groups of school kids, and I could see how many groups of school kids are out and about with like 2 or 3 or 4 teachers, and there might only be 10 or 15 of them, but I could see the kind of care that they're getting, right? I don't see anybody running around with 4 kids in the back of their cars at all. I see moms walking down, drop the kids off to school, and so they have higher taxes. I believe they have just a better integration in school. They have better food in their schools. They're like the kids' menus in restaurants isn't chicken nuggets and spaghetti. Yes. There's like, my kids are distraught with having to eat prawns and cheese boards. But they also emphasize time off here. And so people are walking slower. People have more time off. Just this morning, it's a Wednesday morning. I walked through the center of town. There's a big market on, right? On a Wednesday morning. Half the town is out, just meandering around, picking up their croissants and their bread for the morning. And so there's a cultural acceptance of relaxation. They have a cultural acceptance that they all can retire, no matter what it is that you do. You can retire when you're 61 or 62. And when you retire, you will have amazing healthcare. We got on a train the other day with the family, and my youngest, all kids here could travel on the trains up until they're 4 for free, and public transport. The public transport's amazing, right? And then my 8-year-old and my 6-year-old is almost a euro or two. And this is to go like to Toulouse, fairly far away. Their infrastructure is just amazing, and it's affordable, and it's just way, way, way more usable. These trains get right into the center of town. I just felt overall, just work and working here is a byproduct of the lifestyle that everyone has access to. And I'm not saying French farmers aren't blocking every highway every summer, and I'm not saying this is some kind of utopia at all. And because if you're super ambitious, if you're just ambitious and you're like, I want big things for myself, I'm not in Paris, so I'm sure Paris is a very different a very different story. But if you're super ambitious, America is an amazing place to be, because you can go there, you can outpace all. Like, it would be very difficult for me to, or not for me, because obviously I'm not French, but I would imagine very difficult here to really grow big, and get big if that's what you wanted, right? So I would say, go live in the States. But yeah, there you go, Clark. Like, that's what I see. I see a society that is more at peace with itself. That it's more, there's a huge middle. I don't see any homeless people. There's very few super low end, and there is some very wealthy people, of course, there are. But in general, there's a big middle class, and that middle class is what I'm looking at. And that middle class seems to be pretty at ease with itself. And so I say all of this, Clark, and we'll get into the topic of this conversation about what you as the listener, you're walking down the street or you're in your car right now, ask yourself, what is it that you want? Because there's a cost to what that want is, right? And Clark, we're going to talk about what, for most Americans, I'm going to throw this back at you now. When you talk to your friends, and I ask you that question, what do you want? What is it you want? What do you hear? And what's your answer?
I want to I want to take a step back for a second, and I think that it's very hard, and this is why it's so important to travel, is that it's everything you just said. I don't think that you could get 90% of that by Google, YouTube channels. Like there's just certain things that you have to see and observe on your own, right? And the amazing thing about traveling is like you just described a lot of, happy people or seemingly happy people. I think we'd all like to spend less time on our phones, right? I think we'd all like to be able to have more hikes with your daughter to be able to hear about what's truly going on in their life. Like I think that's probably a common thread among most parents, right? And that's all very, very positive things, right? And the amazing thing about doing what you're doing right now, I'm going to be doing it in a month or so, is, France isn't right and France isn't wrong, and we're not right and we're not wrong, right? For you to be able to go over there and say, well, I like how they view life on this. Kind of like a buffet, right? And you kind of pick and choose. You're like, oh, I like this. Nah, I still think we have to work hard, right? I don't want to just sit around and pick up smoking in a French cafe and smoke all day and drink cafe, right? So it's like, what is it that I can take that I really like? What are some things I'm like, I don't like that, and I like my American mindset and these things. So you can kind of get the best of both worlds, right? Because nobody's 100% right. Their healthcare isn't 100% right. I like to not have half my paycheck being taken with taxes, right? Getting back to it, David, you had asked, what it is that I want, maybe what it is that my friends, my family, people that I associate with want. 99.9% of them are born and raised in good old US of A. And I try and spend time around people that are ambitious. They say that you're the average of your five closest friends, and I certainly think there's a lot of merit to that. So if I had to look at my closest network, right, the older I get, the less we talk about what sports team did this, and we tend to talk more about things that are more productive in terms of career things, where we're heading. So my conversations have certainly changed from when I was 23 to 32 to now I'm 40. And a lot of our conversations surround growing businesses, not just in real estate either, right? I like spending time around people that aren't necessarily in real estate because it tends to get a little bit long-winded if you just constantly are surrounded by five other fix and flip guys. Like that to me gets a little bit mind-numbing. So I certainly see a lot of commonalities of just growing businesses, growing your wealth, making more money, being successful. There's certainly things around material things, having a nicer car, getting a nicer this or that, getting a nicer house, things of that nature. And I think that that's kind of how the society is. I think that there's a lot of things on social media where it's constantly in your face. Like if you're not working 90 hours a week, then that's not success, right? Very little do I see where it's like, where do you want to be in the next 2 years? And like, I just want to be a little bit happier. Like I don't hear that very often, right? It's more of like, I want to have this material thing, or I want to have this growth in my business, or whatever it may be. I think that's why it's important to do what you're doing right now, what I like to do, which is go and knock on people's doors in other areas, other cultures, and say, well, what makes you happy? And I think that that's extremely important to your well-being, your health. A lot of times we define health as kind of like your fitness and your diet, maybe your sleep. I think there's almost a fourth leg to that, and that's your stress, right? Like where's your stress level? Because I know a lot of people that are very stressed out. They make great money, but they're, probably not living the healthiest lifestyle. Yeah, they've got a big bank account, but ultimately, what is it for? What do they actually want? Is it just to make an additional amount of money that doesn't really impact their lifestyle at all? So that kind of leads us, David, a little bit into, yeah, yeah. What do you want? Do you want $5 million? Do you want $10 million? Do you want the new car? Do you want the big house? Do you want to be happy? What is it that you want, right? The title of this episode. And I think the question that follows right behind that, David, is what does it cost? What is it going to cost you to get $10 million, right? How quickly do you want to get to $10 million if that's your goal, or 100 houses, 100 rental properties? I want to flip 10 houses a month. I want to, be the top salesperson. I want to be the best architect, whatever that may be. And I'll throw it over the fence to you, David, is you're sitting in France right now. You're going to be there for 2 months. I'm going to come over and meet up with you here in about a month. So I'll be leaving Tampa for that. But what does it cost you? And the interesting thing is that you actually Airbnb'd your house. So you're actually going to be making money, which is a whole nother topic in itself, to be able to pay for your European trip. Your kids get to go and do all these amazing things, which is super cool. But ultimately, it has nothing to do with you Airbnb being your house. It started years ago, right? It started 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago when you started investing. So I'm going to ask you the question, is that you're sitting in Europe right now. You just went on a hike. Yesterday, you took me on a FaceTime tour of like this cool little old downtown with castles and all these, brick streets and people just chilling out, eating in cafes and smoking cigarettes, overlooking this beautiful scenery over mountains and over this beautiful water in France. But it's you're not doing that just because you Airbnb'd your house in St. Pete, Florida, to be able to kind of like offset the cost of that. Tell me a little bit about what it's cost you to be sitting here in France talking to me on this podcast. You're not stressed out. You don't have a bunch of, stress on your shoulders because you've got a deadline due on some, file that you're working on for a company, corporation X. What does it cost you in your life? And that could be dollars, it could be time spent, it could be relationships lost, it could be stress, it could be a whole host of those things that has led you to the point that you're sitting there right now with that gorgeous French background.
It's a great question. I think inherently, if you are ambitious, and I mean wildly ambitious, I think America is the best place in the world for you, because you can go there and be whatever you want to be. Because I think the United States is the single best place in the world that rewards hard work, And as a little analogy I gave you as we started talking today is immigrants go to the United States, and when they get there, they have nothing, no support group, no security blanket, no social services underneath them, no safety net. They have to just get there. And I remember years ago sitting outside of a house that we were going to buy, and there was a field behind us, Clark. And I pointed over at the field, and there must have been about 100 people, big hats on, planting some seeds or something like that in the field. And I pointed at you, and I said, Clark, that's a field full of immigrants. And that's where the journey starts for so many people. It starts in that field. Okay. And so people leave these places like France or Spain or you name it, wherever, where everything is comfortable and everything is preordained. You'll never be poor. You'll probably never be rich, right? And so if you're wildly successful, the United States is the place to go, because when I went there, I was trying to answer this question, like, what do I want? And I wanted to essentially, when I look back at it, I wanted resources to be free, right? To be free. And I think buying your time is the single only real benefit to money. There's a certain amount of money that's useful. buy yourself a nice house, get around in a car, pay your bills, all of that. That goes without saying, right? But after that, I don't think sending your kids to a professional tennis coach is super useful, or getting your kids, even though they might not be that talented, and sending them to the best basketball coach in the United States. You know, when I think when you get to that level of wealth and you're trying to find things to do with it, that just doesn't make you happy. I don't think anything like that makes you happy. So your question is what did it cost me? And I gotta tell you, right? It cost me a lot. It cost me a lot of deferred gratification. It cost me a lot of work. I spent, uh, you know, 15 years working hard every day, but I didn't understand that working hard for the man, if you will, was a dead end for me, because it pays you just enough to 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 have a nice life, have a nice car, have those 7 days off a year, but it will never free you. It will never give you that freedom. And that's ultimately what it is, I believe. What did it cost me? It cost me years and years and years of working for people and knowing something was broken, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The amount of anxiety and stress that not knowing the answer to that caused me, because I was inherently ambitious and I was European and I was in the United States. That was the cost. Number one was just trying to, like, what's wrong? What's broken here? I don't know. And it wasn't a United States thing. It's just what's broken with this whole concept. I could see that I was never really going to free myself. I was always a saver. And so I started saving, and I realized always that there's something you can always do that makes more money than the previous thing you were doing, So you're always be looking at what you can do with your time that makes you more money, with less stress, if you can do that.
Yep.
And the cost for me was, learning, let's say, real estate. And then the cost within that was working 15, 16-hour days for honestly 20 years, right? And the cost was also every dollar I got from that, I reinvested it. I didn't take it and buy that nice car, because that's just ridiculous, right? I didn't take it and do any of those things, right? And so the cost of fulfilling what it is that I want, which is I want my time back, was deferring gratification for all of those years. Because, true wealth and freedom is created, in my view, by investing and saving money prudently over time, right? I think the takeaway in answering what is it that you want, could be what you want, Clark, or could be what the listener wants, is anything worthwhile. You're going to need the patience to get to it, right? You're going to need patience. You're going to have to learn it. You're going to have to get good at something, right? Really good at it. And then you're going to have to give it the amount of time that it takes normal people and normal activities to get you there. So you need to have patience, be willing to work hard and learn something, and stay at it. Don't be jumping from one thing to the other. And then you have to accept, if you're 20 or 25 or 30 listening to this, please, please, please understand that success takes time. You might have a flash in the pan success with an Amazon store or this. That's not the success we're talking about. We're talking about success where you never have to go to work again with a resume. So if you know somebody driving a fancy car, but they have to work next Monday, that's not the success that we're talking about here. And so what do you want here, Clark, to me, is about controlling your time. I think is the highest dividend money pays. I don't know if you'd agree with that, but financial freedom ultimately means having the autonomy to choose how you spend your time without being bound by a job or by income, right? And so how does this all relate to investing? Um, Anybody knows that we talk about debt by time by scale, and there's a great cost to that. You have to take your resources. You have to learn how to be an investor. You have to learn, you have to be patient. You have to let it do its thing. And then one day the dividend will be paid, right? And the dividend is getting your time back. It doesn't happen overnight. No success happens overnight, right? No sustainable success. A lot of people will get famous overnight, but they're only famous for a minute. They're very rarely famous forever. A lot of people can make a good song or even a good album, but come back 20 years later and say, are they sustainably successful? So sustainable success, I think it's the takeaway from here in this podcast today is go easy on yourself. Learn things and know that it takes 20 years. You're not going to learn a lifetime skill tonight. And then that skill is going to make you $1 million tomorrow. That's not how it works. So just go easy on yourself. Be a little bit more French in your day-to-day life. Maybe walk a little bit slower. Maybe put down your phone and maybe ask the people around you to put down their phones. Maybe turn your phone off at 5 o'clock every day, right? Maybe spend some more time talking to your mom or your dad or your kids, and try and step away from just the pace of life that I experience when I'm in the United States. It's just my phone's always on. People always feel they have access to me, and that caused me, in hindsight, an amazing amount of stress when we were ramping up and scaling our business, and I was always available to my clients, and I want to be respectful and kind and generous to every one of them, but there is a huge personal toll to that. So for me, there is no more noble goal, no more bigger want than to buy your time back. It is going to take longer than you think. You better have patience, learn this craft, and remember, you're probably going to take sometimes 3 steps backwards, and then you take 1 step forward, and then 2 more steps backwards, because a lot of success is luck. You happen to be born at a time where there's not a world war. You happen to be born during COVID, not COVID. A lot of success is luck. So again, I use a French word, the joie de vie. Let the joy of life be your goal, right? Taste the food, enjoy friendships, enjoy your family. And I think that inside that, know that anything worthy is just going to take time. And that's my view on it. That's what I want. What about you, Clark?
Well, that was powerful. You almost kind of put me in like this deep state of thought right there, David. So I tip my cap to you. The cost, I learned something when I first started my real estate business, David. I thought that everyone was money motivated. And so I remember my first couple employees that I hired, I was like, hey, you're money motivated because I'm money motivated. So obviously everyone must be just like me. And I said, hey, I'm going to give you a bonus if you hit, X amount of calls or whatever the incentive was, right? And I was like, do you want to make more money? Oh, yeah. Of course I want to make more money, right? And then guess what didn't happen? That they didn't hit those goals. And it's like, I don't understand. I'm giving them an incentive to do that. And they weren't willing to pay the cost to get the reward, right? And I just figured that was what everyone wanted. They were money motivated. We're sitting here talking about how all Americans, they just want to get rich and they want to make a lot of money, right? And I learned a kind of a valuable lesson is that if I had said, hey, if you hit these goals, these metrics, these KPIs, whatever you want to call them, I'll give you a week off. I'll add an extra week. Maybe they would have been working till 7 o'clock at night on a Friday to get to that extra week of vacation, right? Maybe it's that they wanted recognition. Maybe it is they wanted, lunch brought in 3 times a week, whatever the case may be. And so that cost, they weren't willing to pay that cost, right? And so I look back at my own cost that I paid, and although, I want to say you hear a lot of times, someone's driving around in a 1993 broken Honda Accord until, while they've got $10 million dollars and, they did this. Like, I know looking back that I had, for the most part, still lived in decent housing. I wasn't living in top tier housing. To this day, I will go to the grocery store and compare per ounce costs to see which one is cheaper to make sure I'm not overpaying for that box of noodles or whatever it may be. And so there's little things like that. I'm, just very cognizant of what things cost and how I can potentially save money, by spending less as opposed to spending more. But I just know that realistically speaking, like those things helped me a little bit. But the thing that it cost me was that I was just constantly taking whatever money I made and just, to your point, you said the exact same thing. I make 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. I'm just shoveling it into the next investment property. It may have been a good investment. It may have been a bad investment in terms of like the neighborhood, the quality of the tenant. I could have made all the mistakes, but ultimately it was still better than it sitting in a savings account. And, we've talked a lot about the psychology of money. And when money sits in a savings account, or it sits in a CD, or it sits in a money market where it's easy to get access to, by human nature, it's just easier to spend that versus putting it on. I've chose buying rental properties, right? I can't just go to the rental property and like saw out a piece of the driveway and liquidate that into $20,000 cash and go spend it on a boat, right? I have to do stuff. I have to go to a bank and I see, do they do equity loans? And then is the interest rate too high? And it's just enough for me not to go do it. And I'm like, whatever, I'll just let the equity build in that, right? So the cost for me was a little bit of the risk that, I couldn't just go liquidate that. And I think that's a lot of what people may be listening to is they're not willing to take that risk of the cost that it takes to say, hey, I'm going to go put $75,000 down on a rental property that I can't just go and say, whoops, I need 50 of that back, right? You can't do that. But to me, that cost was actually low risk because I didn't care. Because again, I'm trying to keep my cost of living at a fairly manageable level where I'm not trying to keep up with the Joneses. I don't need to have like the latest iPhone. I don't need to have the brand new car, but I'm not living in the slums either. There's a balance, right? I don't have to be driving a 1993 broke down Accord, living in some, Section 8 apartment. I can still live in a nice area, right? But it may not be the nicest area. It may not be the nicest car. And then if you take that and then combine it with just shoveling money, I didn't know where the hell I was going when I was buying investment properties, especially my first probably 10 to 12. But I just knew that buying real estate was a good idea. And I know that today we're sitting here having this discussion about Europe, about your kids, about all these different things, about being able to see other cultures. What you've been able to do over the last 3 or 4 weeks is stop and smell the roses, right? You get to look around. You're not that stressed. You've got, your kids are going on hikes and they're going on camps and, all these amazing things, but it's all a compounding effect from the last 20 to 25 years. And the problem is that people will see your success today, David, and they'll say, oh, wow, he's got this many properties. But it takes all that cost that led up to that. And if you're listening to this and you're not willing to delay your gratification and maybe not buy that brand new car, that new cell phone, that this, that, then maybe it's not maybe you're that person that's not going to get that bonus, like my employee that didn't want to get it, even though they said they want to get it. So what is the cost that you're willing to go through to get it? And I think that's a big deal. So it kind of leads us to, like for me, what do I want? I know for a fact that exactly to your point, I want my time, right? I love to travel and I've set a goal for myself. I'm 40 years old, January 1, me and my girlfriend sat down and said, in 2 years, we want to be able to go spend about 2 to 3 months living somewhere else and then coming back for 2 to 3 months and yo-yo back and forth from that. So I know that in my head, I've got about a year and a half now where I need to, be making sure that I'm setting the things in place to make that happen. So if you're not really having an honest conversation, because it's such, what do you want, right? It's such a simple question at the end. What do you want, right? And it's not an easy answer. Like I don't know. I want to be healthy. I want to be, this. I want to be that. But I do think that you have to literally write something down to say, well, where do you want to be in 2 years? Because if not, you're just going to work, and if you want your freedom of time, I know the way you will not get your freedom of time, and that is by only working for compensation, right? I go to work, I get paid. You may get paid well, you may not. It doesn't matter. But how are you going to get freedom of time by only getting compensated for the physical time that you put in yourself, right? You have to be able to lean on something other than your physical time to trade for compensation. That could be, you mentioned drop shipping, right? So like a system and a process where you have like a side hustle to where you're letting systems and processes earn you income while you sleep. Maybe it's marketing. Maybe you're some, social media guru and you're able to leverage your name and be able to get advertising, things like that. For us, the easiest thing is leveraging your capital, right? Investing in things, letting rental properties appreciate while you're sitting here, making your active income and whatever it is. But if you are listening to this and you want time freedom, I don't know how you can get time freedom if the only way for you to get compensated is by physically going into work every day or working your 9 to 5 on your laptop. So if you're sitting on the beach, you're not getting paid anymore. That's not sustainable. Yeah, you can do it for 3 months, one time, but are you going to be able to do that for an extended period of time and truly figure out what you want? So that's kind of a little bit, David, about
Right.
of how you can leverage something. And I think if you can take away that question is like, do I want freedom of time? I think a lot of people want that. Or they'll say, I want freedom of wealth, which then gives you the time to do whatever the hell you want to do, right? But if you're only a one-legged stool and it's depending on your physical efforts every day, I don't know how you're going to achieve it. And I don't care how much
Right.
money you make.
So let me jump in on that. So here's what I heard. What do you want? What do you want, the listener? Nobody can answer that question other than you, right? So what do you want? The next question is to ask yourself is, why do you want it? Why do you want it? So sit in your car right now, or you're running down the street. What do you want? Why do you want it? Then the next question to ask yourself is, what is the cost of it? Okay. Now break that cost down into 3 categories: into time and patience, effort, learning, okay, and stress and anxiety, right? So what do you want? Why do you want it? What's the cost of it? Break all that cost down into its smaller, more manageable pieces so you can analyze the cost upfront. Then ask yourself, do you still want it? And if the answer is yes, I do, and I'm prepared to wait 20 years, and I'm prepared to sacrifice, 5 years of, 16-hour days, I'm prepared to save 85% of my disposable income and put it into investments. And that could be ETFs, it could be real estate, it could be whatever it is that you want to invest in. And then, so know how long it's going to take. So the thing that you want, right? Because it's probably going to take 10,000 hours, right? Of learning, of doing, of repetitive motion. And so, because when people say, I want to be healthy, well, buying your time back is a great way of being healthy.
Yeah.
Because now you're not eating on the run, you're not eating on a train, you want to spend more time with your kids. That's time. You want to have, you want to spend more time at the gym, or you want to, take care of your physical health. There's time again. And so, look, the bottom line is, you're going to have to identify what you want, right? And then understand that it's going to take effort. And more importantly, one thing that you missed out on there, risk. So a lot of people, you're alluding to the fact that you're going to have to do this. If you don't want to save and do this, well, then, then you're not going to get it. But the bottom line is a lot of people are great at sacrificing, going out and working. They're great at saving, right? But they are really bad at taking risk. And they're not able to do it. Okay. So you have to be able to take some risk in order to free yourself, because good investment isn't necessarily about always earning the highest return, right? but it's about minimizing the odds of a permanent loss, right? So having realistic expectations, a long-term mindset, and avoiding big mistakes is more important than chasing outsized gains. And what that means is take risk, minimize that risk, which is why we're in real estate. It's almost impossible to have a 100% loss in real estate. There's ways to do it. It's pretty catastrophic planning. And usually the only way that you can experience a full loss in real estate is if you are actually chasing outsized gains. You're leveraging too much, you're using too much of other people's money, you're taking on too much risk. But know that when you answer that question for yourself, what is it you want? If what you want is your time back, and then you look at all of the costs of what you want and say, I'm not prepared to do that, and you live in America, might be a good idea to start thinking about moving to France.
Yeah.
Because here, they do have their time. Or Spain. They do work less. Your boss in Europe is not allowed to call you after 5:30. Not allowed to send you an email after 5:30. You can sue him or her if they come into your free time. They have huge amount of bank holidays in the year that everyone takes off. It could be 11 or 12 long weekends a year. That's one every month. Imagine having Labor Day every month where everyone gets to take it. Not just like, the 4 big ones that people take. And other than that, the only people who get it seems to be banks and title companies in our business. So, people here do live to spend time with their families, and they do live to spend time with their friends. I can see they're not on their phones. I can see that they are taking longer lunches. I can see that they're calmer, they're walking slower. I can see young 20-year-olds, they're not walking down the street with their phone in their head, just walking down. I can see people driving are not on their phones while they're driving, right? So this thing that you want, maybe, just maybe, it's already manifesting itself over here. Places like Portugal or Spain, or France, and maybe a life abroad is the real thing that you might want, which is not the conclusion we said we were going to come up with today. But I do think that if what you want is getting your time back, make a plan for it. Everybody wants their kids to be happy. Everyone wants their health. Everyone wants their mom or dad not to get cancer. If you have a challenged child, or if you that's all obvious. If you're dealing with those things, what you want is just your kid to be better, or what you want is your mom to be better. Oh, there's a well-worn phrase that a wealthy man who is ill wants nothing but his health, and a healthy man who is healthy wants nothing but wealth.
Right.
And it's worth taking that into consideration. So what you want is going to be very different than what I want. But as it pertains to the fact that you might be listening to this podcast, people listen to this podcast because it's about real estate investing, and it's about real estate mindset investing. And please understand what it is that you want. Take action. Take the risks that are required, but don't take too many risks. And just know that it takes patience, it takes learning, and it takes time. And one day, as you say, you spend your summers in Europe, you might spend your winters in a ski resort, you might spend a year traveling. It's a good idea to make decisions in your life that give you that freedom. If I was a carpenter and I had to show up every day to do my work, well, that in itself is a decision. I've decided to be a carpenter. So if you want to have ultimate control of your time, try and learn how to create income that doesn't require you to be there every day. Clark, I think we've summarized this concept of answering the hardest question of all time.
We've
What do
tried.
you want?
Yeah. It's funny. When I was in Athens, Greece last year, I remember me and my girlfriend were sitting in like a little cafe eating, and like it was right overlooking like this square, where they had benches and trees and stuff. And there was a whole bunch, there's like 50 or 60 people just lined up, like sitting on each side of these like little concrete seats. And I turned to my girlfriend. I'm like, oh, I wonder what's going on. Is there a festival? Is there a band that's about to start up? And it was like a Sunday morning or something. And waited, ate, had to spend an hour eating our breakfast or lunch, whatever it was. And then we got up to leave, and there's no festival. There's no guy playing outside that with, an advertisement. It was just 60 people sitting outside talking to each other. And
Yeah.
when you see things like that, you're like, wow, like I don't think that exists in the United States, to just on a random Sunday see 60 people just gathered together. They didn't all know each other. It was probably groups of 10 or 12 different groups of 3 or 4 people all hanging out. It was just an area to hang out where they weren't all
Yeah.
staring at their phones. And you have experiences like that, David, and it's like, man, that's really cool. Like I wish
Mm.
that I would do more of me calling up 3 or 4 buddies or friends or whatever and just going and hanging out without like some huge purpose where I've got to be at this place or we're going to this thing. I think that it's moving. It's good.
That's really good.
It's hard to convey that through a YouTube video. It's hard to convey that through this podcast, right? It's something you physically have to get on a plane. You got to fly over, but how do you get to that? And that's how we've kind of compounded all the way from where you have to start to be able to get your time freedom back or to have it at all. Maybe you've never had it. So
Yeah.
I want to leave the listener with one thing before we hop off. And that is sometimes it's like you don't know where you're at in the process to even identify where to start, right? So I think an easy kind of litmus test is I always I always use it's kind of bad, but it's the hit by the bus test, right? If you got hit by a bus and you're sitting in the hospital for the next 6 months, where are you going to be at financially? Like, are you just going to be living off savings? Are you going to have, a team underneath you that's going to be able to continue to make your salary? Do you have a business that you own where you can kind of, consult from a hospital bed? Do you have rental properties that continue to bring in money and you just have to answer a few emails sitting in a hospital bed? So if you are in that hospital bed for 6 months, how is your life going to be? Like, you're going to have a lot of stress and anxiety because you can't physically go into the office. If your answer to that question is I would be screwed, then you may need to really consider, maybe rewind this podcast and listen to it again, about looking at things a little bit differently when you finish this jog that you're listening to this podcast, and realize that it's time for me to start looking at things that are going to help give my time back. And if all I'm doing is
Right.
just trading time for my compensation, again, it doesn't matter how much money you make, because if you make $500,000 or $5 million a year, your lifestyle is probably, you probably got a nicer house now. You probably got that. So
Mhm.
those are things that are just so important that I want to get across on this, is to
Right.
stimulate thinking differently and being able to delay some of that gratifications, and get out, and don't always go to Rome or go to, Punta Cana. Like, get out and go see some other places other than like the top place in France. Don't always go to Paris. Go someplace else. There's beautiful places across this country.
Right.
And the only way to do that is get your damn ass on a seat in an airplane and go travel the world.
Let me just finish up on this one then. Okay, so we were talking about the various observations about Greece and whatnot. Let me be fair. Okay, here in France, people pay more taxes, but in return, they have genuinely better services that work for them. They have better trains, they're clean, and they're expansive, and they move on time. They really genuinely have a world-class healthcare system that's accessible, and it's largely free. They've clean streets. Just down the street there, they power hose the streets every single night. City come out and they power hose the streets. Okay. Around the corner from this house right now, I could go down the end of the street and there's probably 2 or 3 groups of, 60 old dudes playing boules with each other. We're all just hanging around, and then there's equally to be groups of young people just hanging around, playing boules again. Okay. Um, and so they have a slower pace of life. I don't think a lot of French, if I ask them what do you want, they would tell me, I want 10 million euros and I want to earn 100,000 euros a month. I just don't know how often I'll get that answer if I ask the question, because it's not what they want. I will actually ask the question now. What is it you want? And I have asked the question in Ireland a lot. And a lot of people have told me they want to be mortgage free. That's their overall goal in life. I just want to be mortgage free. Okay. Because I spent a summer asking that question. What do you want? You know, what's the big goal for you as an Irish person? And I think what's different in the United States is we do pay less tax, but we get less services, and we get a healthcare system. I know that my healthcare costs just under $3,000 a month for me. Okay, I know my car insurance here in Europe is like 400 euros a year. Car insurance for me and my wife is nearly $4,000 a year. And property taxes here are irrelevant. You know, they genuinely own their homes. So once they have their mortgage paid off, there's no more cost. There's not, like, that lowers the stress. They're not worried about their retirement because it's kind of built in, right? And then the cost of all of their services when they hit retirement age, you know, the cost of traveling disappears, cost of healthcare disappears, the cost of long-term health disappears. So because they have these social safety nets, for better or worse, we could get on a, you know, that's an existential political question for a lot of people. They have, in general, the general person on the street has less stress. Whereas for me, my experience of living in the United States is my costs, they really never end. You know, my property taxes are always rising. My insurance is always getting crazily more expensive. My property insurance just got into it's become a noise. It's not even a number anymore. Just send me a letter that I open it. It's a big long noise rather than an actual "you owe us this year." It's like a scream comes out of the envelope. And my point being is that the financial anxiety in the United States just has always appeared to me to be way higher, right? And because the cost of being there, the cost of all of the things you just mentioned, healthcare, cars, car insurance, travel, it doesn't level off at any point. And so we need, almost everyone I know in the States has a job, but they all have secondary and third forms of income, right? They've jobbed and they have investments, then they might have a side hustle, they might have this. Europeans don't really have that because they pay this higher rate of tax, and then they have, they've got less extremes of wealth and extremes of poverty. And I think because of that, life here is just on a day-to-day basis less anxious driven. And so I'll leave you with that. I think what drives my anxiety when I live in the United States is that I need exactly what you just said. If something happens to you and your income stops tomorrow, how are you going to, because you're just right out of luck, right? And so that fear is what's driven me into buying a rental portfolio. It's that fear of, one day I'm not going to want to continue to earn, if you will. And so I'll leave you with that analogy, right? I think if you could create a decent income stream that you don't have to work for in the United States, you get to live like a French person.
I love that. We'll take you out on that. So we appreciate you taking us, if you're stuck with us throughout this episode. It's been great to have David over in Spain and France. We want to bring you guys, you ladies, a slightly different approach, a different topic, a different way. And I think that's a lot of the reason why it's the mental portion of this is so much more important than like which type of rental property to buy, right? Or which type of landscaper to use, or which contractor, or, and we talked about those things, but in all reality, we always keep coming back to the fact that it's all about the mindset going into things is so much more important than the true nuts and bolts of like who's the best hard money lender to buy a rental property and then do a refinance. Like that's all important, but it's not anywhere close to as important as to the higher level stuff, but it's less sexy. You know, it's not as clickbaity. It's not make $1 million tomorrow or how to buy 10 rentals in the next 6 months, right? So we tend to we feel passionate about what we're talking about, and hopefully it kind of comes through in the the content we're delivering. So if you like what you're hearing, we really appreciate, as we always ask, for reviews on whatever podcast platform you live on YouTube. Go share it. Go send this episode to a person that may be on the fence or having some sort of trouble with where they're at. And I think we'll leave it at that. And we're gonna let David go off and go enjoy some more French croissants. Say it. You said it really well. I was like, say it, David. How are you
All
gonna?
right.
What croissants are you gonna?
I'll tell you what, it's late. It's late in the day, and I'm not going to be having any croissant between now and bedtime. But what is on right now is the European Football Championships are on right now. Very fortunately, so there's like big, massive games of soccer on each night. So, one is going to kick off in an hour and 13 minutes, and I'll
You're
go
gonna make it.
and get dinner ready and watch the football and have a nice evening and maybe have a glass of vino while we're doing it. So thanks for sticking with us, everybody. This is, like Clark said, we can do the hows all day long, how to do this, how to what's the best 10 markets, what's the best time to invest in real estate, how to get your first deal. That's all simple stuff. But actually the hard stuff is the mentality and the reason why. I can only do something if I know why. And I hope that this episode has helped you understand that, if you want to, the ultimate use of money is to buy your freedom. And I don't think that a goal of $10 million means anything. I want 10 million. What's that mean? At what cost? So I hope that's the takeaway. So we'll leave it right there. How about that?
We'll see you guys. Thanks for sticking with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. David, have a good day. Enjoy
Thanks,
your time.
Clark. See you soon, buddy. I'm off to watch football.
You've been listening to the Burn Your Boats podcast with Clark Lunt and David Shaw. We would love to hear from you. Please reach out at burnyourboatswealth.com with comments, questions, and if you have a topic you would like Clark and David to discuss on an upcoming episode. We would very much appreciate it if you took the time to rate and review Burn Your Boats podcast on your favorite podcast listening app, and make sure to follow and share on social media. Content in Burn Your Boats podcast is for entertainment purposes only and is not legal or financial advice. Please review our legal disclaimer at burnyourboatswealth.com. Thank you for listening.